This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks. So thank you for coming today. Today is Tuesday. We're getting into the semester here and pretty far into the semester. We're at midterms. So that's exciting as far as time-wise there. The time has gone by pretty quickly in this semester. So we're looking at the cardiovascular system. Last week we looked at the blood in particular and the liquid portion of the cardiovascular system and the importance of it carrying oxygen, carrying gases, carrying waste products, CO2, nutrients and waste, and moving them throughout the body, right? And so really a very important network, the blood, which would be considered, we call it a fluid connective tissue, right? Because we have these cells present within this matrix. This matrix would be the plasma, the liquid portion of the blood. So today we're looking at, in particular, blood vessels in the heart, and the chief focus will be on those, the heart itself, and how amazing the heart truly is and what it's able to do. I want you to remember and think that when you're thinking about the heart, know that one, it's a pump, but it's not only just one pump, it's two pumps. One pump is taking blood and sending it to the the your pulmonary system. We call it pulmonic circulation, right? We send it to the heart, to the lungs, from the heart, the right side of the heart, to the lungs in order to oxygenate the deoxygenated blood. Then we send it to the left side of the heart, which will then pump that oxygenated blood to the systemic circulation, to the rest of the body, right? So that the rest of the body can receive this oxygenated blood, and allow it to really to stay alive and well and be able to function, right? The cells, the tissues of the body. So the blood is extremely important, and the heart acts as this dual pump, sending it to two different areas of the body, whether it's to the lungs first from the right side, and then to the rest of the body from the left side. So let's go into more detail regarding that, and also know that. So I've got a couple facts from CSHWhalingMuseum.org. Listen to this: an elephant's heart is between 30 and 50 pounds, the weight. 30 and 50 pounds. That's crazy. Now listen to this: the blue whale. Blue whale, it's a mammal, right? It's a blue whale, 400 pounds. So that 400-pound heart is approximately equal to like 35 gallon paint cans. So if you had 35 gallon paint cans, that would equal roughly about 400 pounds. And that's the weight of the blue whale. Amazing, right? Incredible. Wild stuff. All right, so the cardiovascular system. When we think of the cardiovascular system, we think of the heart and the vessels and the blood which is flowing throughout and in that network of vessels. Okay, I mentioned to you that there's two pumps, and that these vessels really know that they can, as far as the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries, and then the different derivatives of those types of vessels can be larger or smaller, and can have different thickness of the muscularity of the muscles that support the vessels. Okay, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. So here we're looking at the heart, and then all the vessels that are connected to it. Now, there's a cool image. If any of you have ever heard of this plastination process, where they actually preserve bodies, the bodies exhibits that they have going throughout the country in different cities and such, and where you're seeing these bodies preserved. Well, they have a couple of different ways that they're able to, through this plastination process, preserve just the blood vessels. And if you can look that up online and see images of that, it's fascinating, folks. I mean, throughout the whole body, you're covered. You have these blood vessels flowing so that all the tissues of your body are receiving the nutrients, are receiving oxygen and removal of waste products and CO2, right? So very important that every aspect of our body, all the organs, all the tissues of our body, all the cells have some interaction with the cardiovascular system. And you'll see here also, and just as a point of reference, and I'm sure that you realize this, but that the blue coloration that we're seeing here, that represents deoxygenated blood. Okay, so the deoxygenated blood coming from the venous circulation, from veins, and that's returning back to the right side of the heart. That's deoxygenated blood. All the red vessels that you see here are contain oxygenated blood, so they are the arteries and such. And so we'll talk about that in more detail. You'll see here also that, so here are the vessels as far as the arteries. Arteries are the larger diameter vessels, then the arterioles are smaller, and then the capillaries are the very tiny vessels that will allow for movement of material in and out of these little tiny vessels. Then you'll have, as far as the next step, so we would go from, as far as the arteries are concerned, from the left side of the heart, we have these arteries. Then we have smaller vessels, and the arteries then break down into smaller vessels, and then the arterioles will then feed these capillary beds. They'll bring the oxygenated blood to the capillary beds. These capillaries, like I said, are very, very thin-walled and tiny vessels. Then leaving the capillary bed would be these venules, right? And then eventually these veins, which are larger vessels that are bringing deoxygenated blood to the right side of the heart. Okay. Now know that as far as the highest pressure measured would be in the arteries, the lowest pressure would not be in the capillaries, but would be in the veins. So blood returning to the heart on the right side would have the lowest pressure in comparison to blood leaving the heart from the left side into the arteries, in particular into the aorta, would be the highest pressure. Okay, so highest pressure arteries, lowest pressure veins, not capillaries. Even though they're the smallest vessels, it's not the lowest pressure. It would be the veins having the lowest pressure. And here you're just seeing the different vessels and such, and just pretty cool stuff. Move on, right? So the link to the lymphatic system, and so we'll be looking at the lymphatic system and talking about, in particular, how this lymphatic system, the next week there, we'll be looking at this, as far as seeing how this system is connected to the cardiovascular system, not at the beginning of the lymphatic system, but at the end of the lymphatic system, draining this fluid, which is comprised of the plasma that's leaked out of the blood vessels and then come into the lymphatic system, and then draining it into the right side of the heart. So, and this lymphatic system would be involved in your immune function. And so we'll talk about that in more detail, but just know that the heart's pumping action puts pressure on the blood, right? I just mentioned that to you. Said arteries have the highest pressure, veins have the lowest pressure, and this pressure that's moving through the body, right, enables and allows for and helps the return of the lymph and the return of the blood to the right side of the heart, so that we can begin the process of getting oxygenated and then going back out into the systemic circulation. And this is important as far as, so blood circulation, we talked about blood last week there, brings oxygen and nutrients to the body cells, carries away metabolic waste. And it helps to pick up and deliver a diverse array of substances, of nutrients, as well as carrying hormones and carrying different what are called plasma proteins. It really works to maintain the function of the entire body. Without blood flow, tissues die. That's a fact, right? So without the blood flow, the life substance that's contained within the blood, without that, tissues die. Here, this is a very interesting example here, just to show you that. So we have, as far as in the digestive system, we have take in food, we take in water. In the respiratory system, we take in oxygen, we take in the atmospheric air that enters into our respiratory system. Then, as a result of the digestive system breaking down the food and the water, right, we end up having nutrients enter into the body, water, salts, oxygen here, as far as for the respiratory system, CO2 being released from the respiratory system. The nutrients, the water, salts, the oxygen, all carbon dioxide, they're all traveling via this circulatory system. Right? Now, know this also, that the blood will be filtered, right? One in the liver, but also filtration of blood takes place in the urinary system by the kidneys, and as a result, we're able to removal of excess water, salts, wastes. They are also leaving the body as a result of the production of urine. Okay? And then you'll see here at the bottom, right? right here as far as elimination of food residues, rapid transport to and from all living cells as far as through the cardiovascular system, and then the elimination of food substances as a result of the digestive system, removal of waste in the urinary system. Know that the blood is continually being filtered and filtration is produced, but this filtration, this filtrate, right, the substance, it's not going to become urine. Only a very small percentage of it will become urine, like less than 1% of what's being produced. Pretty wild stuff. So we'll talk about that urinary system soon, as well as the digestive and the respiratory systems. Okay? And again, you're seeing here as far as we take in oxygen, we then release CO2 into the atmosphere. And know this also, quite interesting, that how gases are moved in and out of our body through the respiratory system. It's as a result of pressure differences, different pressure outside in the atmosphere and inside of our bodies. And that change in pressure will allow for air to go in and then to go out. So pretty neat, and we'll talk about that soon. All right, the double pump that we mentioned here, right? So know that the portion of the heart that's actually contracting, the muscular portion of the heart, we call it the myocardium. It's the middle layer, okay? So we have this pericardium, this outer layer. We have this endocardium, this smooth inner layer. But between those two layers, we have the myocardium. And this is the muscular portion that will contract. Now, I said to you that there are two pumps, and I didn't say to you that there are 4 chambers, right? So there are 4 chambers. There's 2 atria, right? An atrium on both sides, on right and left, and a ventricle on both sides, right and left. And what separates the 2 atrium from the 2 ventricles would be, one, these atrioventricular valves, these AV valves, okay? And they will allow for blood to go in, and then they'll close up, they'll open to allow blood to flow from the atria, the top chamber, to the lower chamber, the ventricle, and then they'll close when that filling has taken place. So, and then allow for that closure of this AV valve will allow for then there to be pressure to build up within the ventricle to then send it to either to the lungs or to the whole body through systemic circulation. So that's the AV valves. You might have heard of the mitral valve. If someone in your family maybe had what was called a mitral valve prolapse, issues with the proper closing of the valve. Tricuspid valve, maybe not heard so much. So the tricuspid valve would be on the right side of the heart. Mitral valve, aka also known as the bicuspid valve, would be on the left side of the heart. The semilunar valves, these are valves that will actually allow for the flow of blood from the ventricles to the lungs or to the rest of the body through systemic circulation. So we'll look at this. So we have what's called the pulmonic or pulmonary semilunar valve and the aortic semilunar valve. Okay. Now we'll see here, as far as looking at the heart and its anatomy and seeing how we have these atrioventricular valves are very interesting looking. And you see here, we say it's tricuspid because there are 3 cusps, right? So tricuspid, bicuspid, aka mitral valve, right? So it has 2 cusps in comparison to the 3. So this is the right side of the heart, the left side of the heart. So this would be the right tricuspid valve, which is an AV valve, right? Atrium, ventricles. Here we have left atrium, left ventricle, okay? Now, let's look at a few parts of the heart here as far as kind of an understanding. So we have the atrium are here, the ventricles are here. So, and know that we call this area of the heart, where the atrium and these great big vessels are located, we call that the base of the heart. Right here, at kind of like the where it comes to a dull point, we would call this the apex of the heart. And it's in opposition to what the anatomy of the lungs are. So if you see here, look over to my left of this image, and we're seeing here that here's the base of the heart, here's the apex of the heart, right? Well, we would say that this is superior, this is the top area, this is inferior, the bottom area. Well, look at the lungs. At the lungs, we have here the apex, and here would be the base. It's opposite in comparison to the heart anatomy, but allows for everything to fit within the thoracic cage and allow for the protection of the ribs and also resting upon this large muscle here, the diaphragm. Okay. Now let's look
Will
and
you
see
point
as
to the
far as,
apex one more time, please?
say again.
You mind pointing to the apex one more time, because it cut out a little bit.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. So we have, here's the apex of the heart, and here would be the apex of the lungs. Apex
Thank
of the lungs is superior. Apex of the heart is inferior. Okay?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank
Sure.
you.
Sure, no problem. So now as we look at the heart also, so know that this is considered the right side of the heart, although as I'm looking at it, it's on the left side, but really as I'm looking at it, it's as if the patient is facing me. And that's why, it's the patient's right side. So we look at the right side, we look at the left side, right? And we'll see here that the vena cava, this is a large blood vessel that's a vein right here and right here, inferior and superior. These veins are taking deoxygenated blood into this right chamber, this right atrium. From the right atrium, they pass through this tricuspid valve right here, and you'll see that we have structures here that anchor the valves to these muscle. These are called papillary muscle. These are just like little papules, little portions of muscle that are anchoring these cords of the tricuspid valve. And then you'll see here that once this valve closes and their pressure builds up, then we're going to push through this pulmonic or this pulmonary semilunar valve. And then the blood will go. Now, here's an exception to a rule. In the body, arteries carry oxygenated blood. In the body, throughout body circulation, and even in the actual, for the heart itself, as far as an organ is concerned, arteries carry oxygenated blood. Exception, when blood is leaving the heart, this right here, so these two, this right here and this, we would say that these are the pulmonary arteries, because arteries carry blood away from the heart. And it's an exception because what is it carrying? Well, it's the right side of the heart, so it's carrying deoxygenated blood to the lungs. So you just have to remember that pulmonary arteries are carrying deoxygenated blood, but it's going right to the lungs. So we would say arteries away. So carrying deoxygenated blood away from the heart. And then what happens is that once the blood gets oxygenated by the lungs right here, right? Then we're going to bring it back via these pulmonary veins. And I said to you before that throughout the whole body, and even the heart muscle itself, the heart organ itself, the veins will carry deoxygenated blood, except for one exception. These pulmonary veins are carrying oxygenated blood to the left side of the heart, to the left atrium. So the atrium are both receiving chambers. They're receiving the blood from whether it's the body, the systemic circulation, or the lungs, and then the actual ventricles, and now we're talking about this left ventricle here, right? We can see those papillary muscle, we can see these chordae tendineae, we can see this is all just part of the mitral valve, right? On the left side of the heart, we're taking oxygenated blood, see the red arrows, oxygenated blood, we're going to put it through, see right here, it's hard to see, but you can see this is the aortic semilunar valve. And we're going to take the blood that's oxygenated and send it to the body via this ascending, the aortic arch. This is the ascending aorta, aortic arch, and then the descending aorta. Right? And it's going to go to, and you'll see these right here. These are sending blood to the head and neck, right? The neck and the head, and the brain in particular. Okay? And so what you're not seeing, which is quite interesting, is that right at the very base of this ascending aorta, right here, oxygenated blood, you're going to see, you're not seeing that there's actually what's called the coronary arteries, right and left, and they're taking oxygenated blood, freshly oxygenated blood from the lungs, right, from the lungs here to the actual heart muscle itself, to the heart organ itself, and oxygenating the heart, so that this way it's receiving this oxygenated blood coming directly from the lungs, and it's allowing for it to never get tired, never get fatigued, right? So we can work out with weights and we can exercise and our muscles can get really tired, right? And fatigue, but hey, the heart can't do that. Heart stops beating you're on to the next life, folks. So quite interesting. So, you know, do all that we can to keep that heart flowing and pumping and doing its job, right? I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and I would like to just see if anybody has any questions. Kind of gone over some interesting stuff so far. Do you have any questions or any comments? You might have known people in your family or friends or relatives of folks that actually have had heart attacks or had heart issues, and having issues with the heart, you know, life or death, right? And very, very crucial to diagnose early and determine what's going on. Vito, you have a comment or question?
Excuse me?
Your mic is on, Vito. That's all. I was just asking if you had a question. Okay, no problem. Will, do you have a question?
What does for the lab assignment due Thursday, what does structures that light passes through mean?
Yeah, so, okay, so, all right. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that at the end, okay?
Yeah.
So the pathway
Thanks.
of light, that's what it means. So if you do a Google search for the pathway of light in the eye, you'll be able to see step by step the structures that it passes through.
Thanks.
I'll make sure I mention that before the end of class.
Thanks.
Okay? And if I don't, just remind me, okay? Yeah, so good, Ernest. Very good question regarding a pacemaker. So let's I'm gonna share my screen. I'll hide everyone. Share my screen. And I'll show you. So in this right atrium here, okay, this is where we would have naturally, right, without the surgical intervention as far as putting a pacemaker into our chest and then having the leads go to the right atrium, we have electrical components within this, we would say the electrical conductive pathway within the heart. And what'll happen is it starts here. It's called the SA node. It's a sinoatrial node, and it begins here in the right atrium, and it starts an electrical flow that will then go to what's called the AV node, and then to other structures right in through here that'll pass through the musculature and send electricity, action potentials, this ability to allow for contraction of first the atria and then the ventricles. And so what'll happen is that when this SA node is no longer functioning like it properly should, or it's malfunctioning, we can end up having this pacemaker implanted under the skin, and these electrical leads can go to the right side of the heart. Let me let's show you what that can look like. There we go. I'll take a moment just to show you what that can look like here. Now, so here we go, as far as you're seeing. So we'll just take an image here and just show you as far as, so here's an example of the pacemaker, and here we have the leads. Now know that it's just really below the skin. So you can actually palpate, you can actually touch a pacemaker, okay? So you can see that there's the pacemaker, and you'll have the electrical leads that would be fed into the heart and the right side of the heart, and allow for it to take the place of or continually work with the heart in order to make sure the heart doesn't skip a beat. That's important, okay? Yeah, pretty fascinating stuff. With a pacemaker, they don't have you go fully out as far as unconscious, because they have to see how you're responding, and so sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable to actually have a pacemaker implanted. Here, okay. So let's now move to our next slide here. Okay, so this is pretty much what I've made mention to you all as far as the heart structure and function. Excuse me one moment. I'm going to turn off my mic, and I just need to say something to somebody in the house here. Excuse me one moment. Okay, sorry about that, folks. So having someone else go to college while you're still trying to teach, it's interesting. So these terms you might have heard of, systole and diastole, or you might have heard of as far as regarding blood pressure, systolic and diastolic, right? So systole refers to contraction phase within the heart, and there's contraction of the atria first and then the ventricles, or relaxation as far as that diastolic phase, that diastole, right? So this is the cycle of contraction, relaxation, right? That do, 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 right? So we get that, we understand that, and this is what makes up the heartbeat, okay? And how many beats per minute, that's your heart rate, right? Or your pulse. All right, so let's take a look at this here, and we'll look at this image and see how we have, and so what we're looking at is the atria contract, fluid pressure in the ventricles rises sharply, so the atria are contracting, they're sending blood to the ventricles, the AV valves are open, the tricuspid on the right side, the mitral on the left side, and it's sending blood into the ventricles. Now, number two, the ventricles will then contract. They'll contract because then the AV valves close, and then those semilunar valves open. Ventricles contract, blood is pumped into the pulmonary artery and the aorta. Pulmonary artery going to the lungs, the aorta going to the systemic circulation, sending oxygenated blood to the body. 3, the ventricles relax even as the atria begin to fill and start another cycle. So you see how we're starting this full cycle here, and then 4, fluid pressure in the filling atria opens the AV valves, those tricuspid and mitral valves, and blood flows into the ventricles, and that process begins all over again. Okay? And I've mentioned this multiple times as we've been discussing this lecture here, as far as the pulmonary and the systemic circuit. So the pulmonary circuit I put in blue because this is deoxygenated blood going to the lungs from the right side of the heart. Systemic circuit this is blood that's oxygenated from the lungs, enters into the left side of the heart, and it's pumped to the body system. So all the systems of the body receiving freshly oxygenated blood. Okay? 2 pumps. And here you're just seeing as far as a very short version for the pulmonary circuit, right? So it's just going very short distance. So on the right side of the heart, lower pressure. Left side of the heart, higher pressure going to systemic circulation, okay? And here you're seeing the outside of the heart. And here, folks, what you're seeing is that, so this right here, this red vessel right here, and only a portion of it right here, these are the coronary, the right and the left coronary artery. If I were to remove this pulmonary artery, this blue, which contains deoxygenated blood, right side of the heart, if I were just to remove that, you would see that from this aorta here, the ascending aorta, you'd see also this left coronary artery carrying oxygenated blood, and this would go then to help really feed the heart organ itself of oxygen. Okay, so take a look at this here, and you're seeing a plastinated, a preserved image of the heart, and you're seeing just the vascularity. That's pretty cool, right? All the blood vessels and such. Now here you're seeing, as far as blood that is going into the digestive system, and then going to the different organs present within the abdominal pelvic region. Okay, and you're seeing all the connections. So the connections are really between the veins and the arteries, sending oxygenated blood, removing deoxygenated, having the deoxygenated blood coming away from those different organs and such, and then taking whatever it is. If they're receiving oxygen, receiving nutrients, and other things that are hormones, whatever else, salts that are passing through the body, and then they're actually taking in the venous system, the veins, the blue, right, returning to the right side of the heart. And you'll see here too that this is an interesting organ here. So we have the liver, which takes a lot of nutrients, takes a lot of blood. It's detoxifying. It's actually producing proteins that are going to be flowing within the blood, which can become also part of the whole immune process as far as the lymphatic system is concerned. We'll talk about that later. And then also the spleen here. The spleen, quite an interesting structure, and this acts as like a reservoir for blood, and it's involved in the immune process, and it really is very important as far as the immune function and filtration of blood. Okay, so we'll talk about that next chapter. So so funny that you said that earlier there, and so we're coming to it now. As far as how does the heart actually contract, and it's as a result of this electrical system, okay, we would say, and the electrical system, right? It's of nervous tissue origin, right? So we have these nerves that are present within the heart, and in particular, right, these electrical signals from the pacemaker cells. I said to you that SA node, that sinoatrial node, it's in the right atrium, and this is where we begin muscle contraction of the atrium first, both atrium, right and left, and then the ventricles, right and left, okay? Now, this is interesting here as far as the nervous system can adjust the rate and strength of cardiac contractions depending upon the need of the body. So if you're just kind of lounging around and not doing a whole lot and just resting, okay, that's just a very regular output. We would say it's under parasympathetic control. You're just like a calmness, and your body is just involved in some repair and just kind of just chilling, so to speak, right? But how about when you're under some type of physical demand and you're doing some work or you're exercising, right? Well, then the body can also receive that input and go, hey, we need to increase the heart rate, increase the blood pressure, increase the respiratory rate, right? All these, and so we can adjust that rate as far as for the rate of contractions and the strength of those contractions upon need. And here you're actually seeing the representation of, right, of this conductive pathway, and really understand too that also that what's taking place here, right, is that as we have this, you've heard of the EKG or the ECG. This is really, you know, that you've seen it on TV programs and movies and such, where, you know, if this right here is a flat line totally, then that means that there's no contractions going on and the patient is dead, right? So, but you'll see here as far as the SA node, here's the AV node, then we have this bundle right here, and then we have these fibers will go through. I didn't mention the term here. So the term here and here is a septum. It's a wall. It's a wall separating the two atria, and there's a wall here separating the two ventricles. Now, know that children can be born with this opening here, right? There's an opening here. It's called the foramen ovale, and really, as very close to when a child is born, that hole will close, and we call it the fossa ovalis, right? It's just like a little indentation, but there's no opening between, you know, the two upper chambers. But during fetal circulation, prior to a baby being born, there's an opening here, okay? It's normal. But some children, the hole doesn't close, right? And so then they need surgical intervention in order to help to close that, because we don't want to have the mixing of the deoxygenated blood here with the oxygenated blood on this side, okay? So this septum, it's just allowing for a wall between the two chambers, and this septum right here, this interventricular septum, allows for a wall between the right and left side, okay? But you'll see here these blue represent the nerves that are actually penetrating through the septum, right? The bundle branches and these Purkinje fibers, right, will then go to the muscle of the ventricles and allow for that contraction to take place. So really what we've got going on is that begins here. This is the pacemaker of the heart, the SA node. We have traveling of these electrical signals to both sides of the heart and the upper chambers. They contract. Then we have the signal pass through in the middle and then go to both chambers, lower chambers in the ventricles. Now pressure, okay, blood pressure. Maybe some of you have known relatives that have issues with their blood pressure, whether it's too high or whether it's too low, right? And so both can cause problems, such, right? But just to have a normal blood pressure and we all have some type of pressure within our system because it's a closed system. It's a closed system of this liquid, this blood under pressure that's then being propelled either to the lungs or to the rest of the body. Okay? So contraction, systole. So systolic pressure, right? So the fluid pressure exerted by blood against the vessel walls, right? So it's under pressure. It's not just as if you were just to take a tube and just drop some fluid into the tube and just have it just pass through the tube. No, it's a closed system and it's under pressure. Okay? So systolic pressure, the peak pressure in the aorta when the left ventricles contract. And so I said to you that the left side of the heart going into the aorta, that's the highest pressure that we have, systolic pressure. Diastolic pressure, right? So diastole is relaxation. So diastolic pressure, the lowest blood pressure in the aorta when the blood is flowing out of it. Okay? So we have the systole and diastole because there's contraction and relaxation. Contraction, do, 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 right? Have that going on. Arises for blood pressure. So normal blood pressure, we say the systole, the higher number, should be between 100 and 119, right? Diastolic, 60 to 79. Okay, so normally you would hear something like, 120 over 80 would be a healthy blood pressure, okay? Well, they even wanted even a little bit lower than that, but 120 over 80 though is acceptable, right? But that's at the high end of normal, okay? Hypotension would be lower than, right? So less than that 100, less than that 60. That's low blood pressure. So that can have issues where patients are fatigued, they're tired, their body's not functioning as well as it possibly can because they're just pretty tired from having a lower blood pressure. Whereas hypertension, right, then we're looking at greater than 140 over 90, okay? And so this means that the body is at really functioning at a higher level, a higher rate of functioning, and this can also lead to issues with your heart, can lead to issues with your urinary system. It can just overall affect your issues of your vision with high blood pressure, because then, and know this, and even with the brain, as far as if you have high pressure flowing through these small little vessels, it could lead to issues where there could be an expansion, an aneurysm, and then even that under high pressure, this aneurysm, this swelling of a blood vessel can actually rupture or burst, and that would be catastrophic and not a good thing. Let's move on here. So the structure and function of blood vessels, right? So we know there, and we've known that the arteries, right, arterioles, they're carrying oxygenated blood. The arteries have quite a bit of muscle, smooth muscle present within. They're more sturdier, they're more firm in comparison to a vein, okay? Large, strong blood pipelines. Why would that be? That would be that way because they are carrying blood under high pressure, right? So that's important. So arteries have to be pretty sturdy. Whereas veins, folks, the other aspect of it, the low pressure aspect, veins, they'll carry valves. They'll have valves present within to prevent backflow, and they're not as muscular as arteries are. So now arterioles are taking blood from the arteries and sending it to the capillary bed, these tiny little vessels. They're specialized for diffusion, meaning that gases can pass through and also nutrients and waste can pass through these capillaries. You'll see here, look at the difference in comparison between the artery and the vein, okay? Yes, there's muscle with both. There's more muscle present for the artery than the vein, higher pressure in the artery than the vein. Highest pressure in the arteries, lowest pressure in the vein. Here's the capillary. See, the capillary is very tiny vessel with only very thin walls so that material can move in and out, pass in and out of the capillary walls, capillary vessels. And so you're seeing here as far as pressure is concerned. I said to you that, right? The arteries, highest pressure, the veins, the lowest pressure. Now, this is interesting. And what you're seeing here is that with these veins, the veins have these valves present, okay? And these valves will allow for one-way flow of blood. So know that we don't want to have blood backing up. Have you ever seen someone have what's called varicose veins, where the veins in their legs in particular, their lower extremity, have been damaged, and so the valves are not functioning right, and so you'll have pooling, extra pooling of blood in these veins, and also they can be very painful, all right? So when the veins are working, when the valves are working properly, the blood flow goes in one direction, okay? When the valves are not working properly, okay, so you see here blood flow to the heart. When the valves are not working properly and they have issues, then we're going to have pooling of blood. We're going to have these varicose veins, which they look painful, they look uncomfortable, and they are. And they're not allowing for the amount of good blood flow coming back to the heart so that it can be oxygenated. We're going to talk also about next chapter about edema, as far as when the heart's not functioning properly and well and acting like a dual pump, very strong, and pumping blood to the lungs as well as to systemic circulation. You can end up having this edema, this swelling of your lower extremities of your legs, and that's a real problem. We'll discuss that next chapter. The venules and the veins, right? These are carrying the deoxygenated blood, and they're bringing it back to the right side of the heart. Okay. And again, I said to you that veins will contain these valves, which will prevent the backflow of blood into the extremities and allow for it to go straight towards the heart, to the right side of the heart. So interesting here. So mechanisms of maintaining blood pressure. So these terms I would like you to know: vasodilation and vasoconstriction. So I'll take here my paper towel, right? So here we have my paper towel roll, and you can see that there's an opening here, right? We would say that this would represent a blood vessel, okay? And that opening here is where the blood would flow through. Well, if that blood vessel had vasodilation, the enlargement of the vessel diameter, so the vessel inside of the vessel would get larger and it would get larger. So it would actually allow for a decrease in blood pressure, okay? Vasoconstriction, a narrowing of the vessel diameter, so that opening here, say that opening becomes smaller. Say that opening becomes smaller by a half, right? So there's vasoconstriction. What's going to happen to the pressure inside of that vessel, that blood vessel? It's going to go up. So vasoconstriction will increase blood pressure. Vasodilation will decrease blood pressure. So vasodilators are medications that can actually increase the size of the vessel diameter of a blood vessel and allow to decrease blood pressure. So if someone has high blood pressure, a vasodilator type medication would be helpful in lowering their blood pressure, okay? And the body can do this. The body can, via homeostasis, does this on itself, as far as if it requires the pressure to increase, the body will enforce certain and allow for certain things to take place to allow for vasoconstriction and chemicals that will contribute to this, as well as holding on to water, conserving water so that we're not producing as much urine, and that will also help to increase the blood volume, which will increase the blood pressure. So yeah, very, very interesting how the body maintains homeostasis as far as stable numbers, keeping the blood pressure at a level that's healthy, as well as keeping the heart rate at a level that's healthy. Okay, so we have these baroreceptors. So we would say a baro would be a pressure receptor. So we have these pressure receptors present throughout the body that maintain and monitor what's going on with the blood pressure. Yeah, and that's a good statement right there, as far as capillaries delivering blood close to nearly all body cells, so that no tissue throughout the body is without some type of interaction with blood in order to allow for these tissues and the cells present within these tissues to receive oxygen and receive nutrients. Now, something interesting here, and I'll give you a couple of examples or exceptions to this would be, so the clear portion of your eye, right? Call that your cornea, right? The cornea, that's avascular, okay? The lens that helps to focus the light that enters into our eyes, that's also avascular, no blood vessels. And one more area, two more areas, cartilage. So the cartilage is avascular, cartilage itself. So cartilage throughout your body, there's no blood vessels going directly to it, but there are blood vessels surrounding cartilage. So cartilage really slow to heal, if at all. And so that many times you have to have some type of surgical intervention in order to trim damaged cartilage. But know that there's still blood throughout the body that goes in areas where even if these structures like the cornea, like the lens, like the cartilage, there's still blood surrounding, but just not in those specific parts. And one more area, and that would be your epidermis, right? So the outer layer of your skin, right, which consists of 4 or 5 layers, thick skin on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet, right? And then also and then the thin skin, 4 layers throughout the body, right? That epidermis, no blood vessels, but there's blood vessels in the dermis, the area below, in order to allow for there to be still oxygen delivered to the epidermis and nutrients delivered to the epidermis. Okay? So interesting how, though, like I said, throughout the majority of the body, capillaries are present so that they go to all the cells and all the tissues of the body. There we go. As far as you'll see here, so this is just an example of one type of capillary where you're seeing that there are these little pores, these little openings, right, that will allow for movement of material through, okay? And you'll see here really, so like cells still stay within the vessels. Let's see where we're at right now. Okay, all right. We have a few more slides to go through. Let's take like a 3-minute break. We'll take a 3-minute break. That should be enough time to just do real quick whatever we have to do. So 3 minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll finish up this chapter. Okay, we have a few more slides to go. We have like 8 more slides to go. Okay, folks, so we'll take a 3-minute break. I'll leave it on this screen here, sharing with you all. I'm just going to shut off my image and mute myself for a few minutes. So see you back in 3 minutes. Okay, folks, so let's begin and finish up the chapter here. So you're seeing here as far as capillary action in the body. So we said that the capillaries, that allows for nutrients, allows for gases to pass through them, right? Very important blood vessels here. All right, so the flow of fluid and solutes into and out of the capillaries helps to maintain blood pressure. Okay? And really, so this is important as far as that there are numerous mechanisms that are present to allow for homeostasis to occur, to allow for the body to maintain the proper blood pressure, the proper pulse rate, right? So it's very important. So part of it is the work with the capillaries, right? So adding to or subtracting water from the plasma, from the blood itself, can either, right? So if we're subtracting, we can decrease blood volume, which will decrease blood pressure, or we can increase blood volume and increase blood pressure. I'm going to write that down for you all here, because that's an important thing for you to know as far as pressure. Here we go. I'm going to so decrease in blood volume, decreases BP. Increase in blood volume, increase blood pressure, BP. Okay, that's very important for you to, that's a concept that as far as having any kind of understanding as far as how blood pressure is concerned, that increase in blood volume, increase in blood pressure, very important. And also to know that if we do things like that vasoconstriction, that is also increasing blood pressure and such, right? Decreasing the sizes of the blood vessel. You know this because if you have a garden hose and say you don't have the end of the hose where you can control the flow of water out of the hose. So you just have a hose and it's connected, but there's no end to it. There's no nozzle, right? And if you take the hose and just turn the water on, there'll be a flow of water. But how about if you constrict the garden hose a little bit? What'll happen to the pressure of the water coming out? Or put your finger on the end and you're decreasing the lumen, the size of the hole where the water is flowing out of. You're going to increase the pressure, right? It comes out stronger and harder, right? So this is how we know as far as with pressure and as far as with volume, and also with whether we decrease or increase the size of the blood vessel itself. Okay, very important. So here are some different pathologies that can occur and that can happen regarding the cardiovascular system. We've probably all heard of these terms before, whether we're just, even if you're just reading something online or watching a video on YouTube and an advertisement may come up recommending some type of medication if a patient is suffering from one of these illnesses and such. So arteriosclerosis, this is an actual hardening of the arteries, and as a result of what's going on as far as plaquing that's building up, cholesterol and other types of fats that can build up, these plaques, we call them, right, can lead to and can contribute to actual clots being removed from the vessel, the blood vessel wall, and start traveling, floating off into the bloodstream, becoming an embolus. So a clot is a thrombus, okay? When the thrombus leaves the blood vessel wall and actually starts traveling into the blood, we call it an embolus. And an embolism is when we have this clot that was moving, travels to an area of the body, like the brain, like the lungs, like the heart, where there are small blood vessels, and it blocks a blood vessel and can limit or totally block the amount of blood flow to an area past that clot, past that blockage, and this can lead to issues of tissue death. Okay, so any tissue that's past that blockage can actually die as a result. Here's an example of something quite cool. As far as for B here first, we'll look at B first, and we'll see here as far as this is an actual stent, right? This stent, this mesh that's placed in a blood vessel that can start pushing up against the plaquing that's present within the area of the vessel that's being restricted as far as blood flow. And this can make quite a bit of a difference as far as allowing for blood flow to pass through that blood vessel that has this plaquing occurring in the smaller vessel. Here we also see that there is an ability for we can take veins from our legs, from our own legs, used to bypass the blockage, okay, and allow for then this oxygenated blood from the aorta, the ascending aorta, to go to these vessels. So here's the blockage. So we go over here, past the blockage, and still send oxygenated blood to those blood vessels so we can oxygenate the portions of the heart that are not receiving the blood as a result of these blockages that could be present. Okay. Pretty wild that we're able to do that, folks. I mentioned to you this term earlier, an aneurysm. An aneurysm, think of it as, have you ever seen a balloon that you blew up, and a balloon that had like a little bit of a bubble on the balloon? So like there was a defect in the balloon itself, and there's this bubble that's there, and it's a weakness. And actually, you know, if you mess with that little weakness there, it'll burst, okay, the balloon. Well, think of it in terms of a blood vessel that has this expansion in the vessel itself. It's a weakness, and if this weakness bursts, so if it bursts, right, this expansion of the blood vessel, this bubble, blood loss can be serious and or fatal. So think in terms of like the aorta, whether it's in the thoracic or the abdominal aorta. Okay, you might have heard this term, AAA, abdominal aortic aneurysm. So this is when we have a situation where the abdominal aorta, which is a blood vessel under high pressure, this is an artery, right? High pressure, carrying oxygenated blood to the distal portion of the body as far as the abdomen and the lower extremities. As a result of plaquing and as a result of the connective tissue that's supporting that blood vessel, it starts to expand. It gets this aneurysm. And if that were to burst, that would be a whole lot of blood under high pressure entering into the abdominal pelvic region. And this could be very serious, and this could lead to death, right? And I'm trying to remember now the percentage. We were just talking about this in my medical terminology class, and I don't remember the number. Darn it. I'll have to get that back to you on that. But the percentage is pretty good percentage as far as patients who will die if they're not near a hospital as a result of a ruptured aneurysm. Heart attack, also called a myocardial infarction, an MI. Damage or death of the heart muscle due to reduced blood flow to the region as a result of this. There's a blockage that's taking place, and it's just stopping blood flow to an area of the heart, and this area of the heart can die as a result, just as we saw with the repair right there. Okay, trying to bypass that repair, that area that's blocked, so we can still send oxygenated blood to this vessel so that it can then go to all of the arteries present within the heart and feed the heart. Heart failure. Heart failure is a very sad thing that occurs, that can occur. It's as a result of the heart is really just what it's saying there. It's failing. You probably heard this term, congestive heart failure. Yeah, okay, so yeah, Ray, thank you. So yeah, so an aneurysm can take place in all parts of the body, indeed. And so if an aneurysm takes place in the brain, and these tiny vessels that are present within the brain, this can lead to death of the neurological tissue, and that also is quite severe and sad, and can lead to death, depending upon where this aneurysm that bursts, this ruptures, occurs. Yeah, good question. Thank you. So coming back to congestive heart failure, so whether it's the right side or the left side, and no matter which side that ends up experiencing this heart failure, eventually both sides will experience this heart failure, and both sides will both experience the issues where it's not working properly, it's not pumping properly, and so there's going to be backup of blood in the lungs, in the whole body, leading to issues with edema, with swelling in the lower extremities and such, and this will eventually lead to the patient's death. You know, even with treatment, heart failure will eventually lead to the patient's death, right? Whether by heart failure itself or as a result of pneumonia, as a result of fluid in the lung. I'm sure many of you have heard of this term before, an arrhythmia. An arrhythmia is just a matter of that there's some type of irregular heart rhythm taking place, and as a result of that conductive pathway, right, within the heart that allows for that contractions to take place first in the atria and then the ventricles. So arrhythmias can be a problem. And so there's medications, there are procedures that can be done in order to try and bring about that normal, healthy sinus, we would say sinus rhythm of the heart, where it's that lub-dub, lub-dub, right? If there's a lub-dub, lub-dub, that would be an arrhythmia, right? That would be an issue where there's something going on with the contraction taking place and just not having full healthy contractions and relaxations, allowing for filling, proper filling, and proper removal of blood from the chambers. This can be a problem. And interesting how inflammation is a factor in cardiovascular disease, and really inflammation and short term is not a bad thing, because inflammation is really the process of the body responding to something going on, as far as whether it's an infection, whether it's something damage as a result of banging, overstretching, pulling, whatever. So inflammation is not a bad thing, but when there's inflammation that takes place over extended periods of time, this can lead to tissue damage, and this can lead to malfunction wherever that may be, as far as the inflammation is concerned. So inflammation in the cardiovascular system contributes to that whole issues with plaquing of the arteries, and issues with also the actual proper functioning of the heart itself. Risk factors, okay? So risk factors here. So as far as genetics are concerned, so inherited predisposition. So genetics do play a role. If your parents, both sides of the family, or one side, or grandparents or great-grandparents had issues with cardiovascular disease, yeah, you're more than likely can inherit that for sure. Issues with the fats, the blood lipids that are present within the cardiovascular system. This can also be problems as far as talking about cholesterol, and issues with if you're eating, your diet consists of fatty foods and you're not eating good healthy foods and vegetables and fruit, yeah, that can be a problem and lead to that plaquing that we talked about earlier there. Hypertension, high blood pressure, obesity, being overweight. Smoking is definitely a contributing factor, risk factor, as well as the obesity, as well as the hypertension. Now, these are all, like, in combination with each other, they all do not help with how the cardiovascular system should function. Lack of exercise, even just the fact that you're over age 50, leads you to be more susceptible to problems with the cardiovascular system. Issues with as far as how inflammation and how your body processes the actual elimination of waste products of protein metabolism, very important. So very, very important to try and address these issues and address them with a physician in order to help you as the patient. Let's see where we're at here. So yes, we have like 2 more slides to, yeah, 3 more slides. Okay. So yes, Ernest, why do blood vessels not collapse when struck, bruised? Let me go to your question here. I missed it there. Let's see. So why do blood vessels not collapse when struck, bruised, or cut open, but people require procedures like angioplasties instead to prop open veins and arteries due to collapse or plaque obstruction? Yeah, so really, because connective tissue plays a role in that. So connective tissue, so recall when we talked about tissues of the body. So when we look at the actual structure of a vessel, so let me go back to that, Ernest, good question. And Ray, thank you for your question also. So let me share screen. All right, so I'll come back to this in a few minutes there. Here we go. So, oh, sorry, I don't know why I didn't. Here we go. Let's see, from current slide. From present. No, cancel. There we go. Okay. All right, so you'll see here that with these vessels, with these blood vessels, there, see the elastic tissue, see the elastic tissue here and here, right? That's important as far as helping to maintain the actual blood vessels. So even when vessels are damaged, they're still staying open because they have, there is present smooth muscle, tissue here, smooth muscle is present, as well as this connective tissue, this elastic tissue, which gives it its ability to stay open per se, right? And then the musculature. Now, when a blood vessel is damaged, there will be a very quickly a vasospasm, a spasm of the musculature to reduce the amount of blood flow through the damaged blood vessel. As far as the plaquing is concerned, you know, you just have this buildup of this material, this plaque material, which is a combination of multiple things that will actually just over time build up and then block, you know, the vessel or extremely reduce the flow through of the blood through that vessel. So this is why the stents are necessary for that, for sure. All right, so this is a bacterial infection, okay? So strep infection, a bacterial infection, and know that streptococcus is a common bacteria that's present, and that doesn't normally make you sick, but if your immune system is compromised, if you're already sick with something else, then strep can cause you to get strep throat, right? So infection within your pharynx, your throat, can also lead to this rheumatic fever, right? And this can affect, and this can damage the heart valves themselves. And so this is why, like a mitral valve prolapse, that's left side of the heart with the AV valve can be damaged. So the body produces antibodies that mistakenly attack the heart valves. And this can affect their ability to open and close properly. And really, in particular, it's that closure and that proper seal that's the problem that can occur, damaging those valves. Endocarditis, so they can actually, so again, too, this is another just type of infection that can attack the heart valves directly. The strep throat originates in the pharynx and the throat and then travels to the heart. Lyme disease is what will occur as far as bacterium as a result of getting bit by a mosquito, as a result, ticks primarily, it's ticks. Sorry, I was thinking of the Zika virus earlier there before. So the ticks, that if you get bit by a tick that was actually on a deer particularly, right, that had Lyme disease and then passed it on to you, this can also attack not only the neurological system, the nervous system, but also can affect the heart. Term myocarditis, so this is an inflammatory reaction that can occur of the heart as a result of some type of infection, and this can also affect the function of the heart. Sudden cardiac arrest as a result of a heart attack, right? And so what can occur is that's major medical emergency, because then the heart is stopped beating, right? So not only do we have what's gone on as far as blood flow, there's been a blockage, which has led to then this heart attack, this sudden cardiac arrest, but it's going to prevent flow to the brain and to the rest of the body. And as a result of really blood flow to the brain is key in order to prevent death of those nerve cells present within the brain. And this is very crucial. So really 5 minutes, right? Brain flow to the brain must be restored within 5 minutes, or nervous tissue will die. And that's really bad. CPR, you've all heard of the term CPR, and this is as a result of doing chest compressions so that we can actually allow for then blood flow to continue until we can have some type of medical intervention where there's some type of defibrillator that will help to shock the heart and bring it back to its healthy sinus rhythm. Okay? And you'll see here as far as the cardiovascular system in blood in homeostasis. So working with as far as blood pressure is generated by the heart contractions, keeps blood flowing. We get that to pumps, delivers cargo, delivers the oxygen, delivers the nutrients, delivers hormones to different areas of the body, and it's removal of waste, right? And helping as far as also aiding in when the heart increases the blood flow, as far as increases the strength of contractions, increases blood pressure. We're going to, for example, like when we're exercising and such, then we're going to also, what happens to the whole core temperature of the body? That increases as a result, okay? And it also helps to distribute that heat throughout the body. And as far as the repair aspect of clotting, very important, and we're good.